Greetings, humans. I'm Andy,
Greetings, humans. I am Jon Pyres.
and welcome back to the Windmill full of corpses. Um, Welcome, John. I'm really happy to have you here. How are you feeling?
Good, man. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Thank you.
Okay, so to start this off, since not everyone who watches this might know who you are or who your band is, could you start by introducing yourself and Threads of Fate and letting the people know a bit of what you do?
Yeah, of course. So once again, my name is Jon Pyres, and then I am the singer in a band called Threads of Fate that I have with my good friends Jack Costo and Vikram Shankar. Yeah, it's a melodic sort of symphonic death metal band that we started a couple of years ago. We released our first record or EP in 2018, November 2018. And we are about to release our first full-length debut record this weekend.
Great. So I guess that leads me right into my next questions, which is your new album, The Cold Embrace of the Light, is very near to its release. How long have you been working on this album, and how are you feeling in the anticipation of the release?
So I think we worked on the record for the better part of a year and a half. It's a little blurry. A lot of stuff has happened, in the recent years.
Yes.
I think that's about how long we spent working on it, and the anticipation is crazy. There's a lot of hype, and a lot of people are excited, which is surreal to me. It's really nice to see so many people be stoked about this record.
Well, I sure am one of them, and I am also fortunate enough to have heard it already. Um,
Thank you.
so, listening to this album, I thought it was very emotional, very melancholic, kind of dark, kind of sad. Uh, Gave me a lot of images, a lot of different moods that I wouldn't really know how to put into words. So I'm really curious because I didn't actually have access to any lyrics. What sort of concepts do you actually explore with this album? What are the lyrics generally about?
So the tone of this record was significantly darker compared to the EP. Specifically on this album, we touched a lot on themes such as grief, loss, anger, and just sort of being overcome with these emotions. And another big theme on the record is death. Yeah, it's a pretty bleak setting, but yeah, I mean, some of us, we were going through a very tough time when this record was written, and it was kind of what came out of us. That was the result of what we were experiencing at the time.
Well, I really like that about it is that it sure feels genuine. Like,
Yes, that's definitely one of the big things about this band is that the emotion is very raw in all of the songs.
yeah, I could feel that. I could definitely feel that. So, uh, to follow up on that, since you're saying the way you were feeling when writing it kind of influenced how it turned out, did you actually have a vision to start with, an idea of what you want the album to be when you started working on it, or did you just start writing music and it turned into whatever it turned into?
Well, it was kind of weird because when I started to write music for this record, I wrote, I think, like 3 or 4 songs that I completely scrapped.
Oh.
Yeah, so there were about 4 songs that I came up with that we didn't end up using because I no longer, I was just not feeling them anymore. Like, so
Mhm.
something changed. I can't remember what exactly happened, but I basically started over, and yeah, Jack and I co-wrote a lot of it at his house, and then Vikram wrote 3 songs. He actually wrote the title track, "The Cold Embrace of the Light," which ended up being the first single.
Awesome, awesome. I think I actually heard him mention that because I've seen his interview with the Prog Space. The Prog Space
Yeah,
is a site I write for, and I will have a review of the album coming there. Uh, I actually wanted to ask you about this song. First off, it was, for me, hearing it for the first time, it was a massive change in pace compared to your previous stuff that were almost like power metal and maybe slightly symphonic death or symphonic black metal. And then this one just hit me like doom metal. So uh, did you aim for that impact with the first single? Because I think it's actually not only contrasting with the first EP, but actually the slowest, saddest song on the record, as far
yeah.
as I could tell.
The thing with Threads is that we pretty much write what we're feeling at the time. There's no agenda really.
Mhm.
And like at the time that this is the sort of sound that we were all feeling. Like it was the sound that we felt was correct for what we wanted to do with this record. Even though a lot of the songs, the truthfully speaking, and this could be for better or worse, the album is all over the place stylistically, because you have that song and then you have a few others that are more up, they're faster. Then
Yeah.
some are sad, others are kind of more energetic. So it's kind of just all over the place.
I like that you're actually touching on most of the things I had planned to ask you. So this is the kind of album that I like to call a genre soup. And being
Yeah,
very much into prog music, it's a thing I'm always a fan of. And
yeah.
often what I wonder about artists when they do records like this is, do you actually plan to incorporate a lot of genres, or is it just
There,
writing
I mean,
music naturally and it turns
when
out
we,
like this?
yeah, no, when we first started to write it, we specifically Jack and I, we have always been huge fans of bands like Swallow the Sun and INSOMNIUM. We are complete fanboys for all those guys. And I think the new Swallow the Sun had recently gotten out during that time, and it was a massive influence on all of us. And so yeah, but we did, that being said, even though that we were big into that sound at the time, we didn't really have an agenda, so to speak, with what we wanted to do with this record. It just happened. We did what we felt was right.
That's awesome. That's how I think the best albums I've heard came about. Um, when you say the new Swallow the Sun, do you mean, I assume you mean the one they released back in 2019 that was When
Yeah,
the Shadows Forced into the
when
Light?
I had a Force into the Light, yeah, that record ended up being a tremendous game changer.
I'm feeling that because I haven't heard a lot of their discography, and up until that point, I had tried to listen to them a number of times, but doom metal wasn't really my thing. I've always been much of a symphonic and prog listener, and maybe melodic death and technical death. But that album, that one sold me. Like it was my favorite doom metal album after the first listen. I was sold
Well,
on it.
because I'm not into doom metal at all. That's literally the only band I listen to or love that has that sort of style.
Mhm. Nice, but you ended up writing a song like that, so that, well, actually, Vikram wrote it. Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
What are the other two songs he wrote?
So he wrote The Horrors Within, Cold Embrace of the Light, and then he wrote Ashes, the
Oh,
very last, the
wow.
piano.
Well, I think those might actually be my favorite songs on the album.
Yeah, he did a great job, man. And the thing with him, and he's terrifyingly good at this. Um, the songs that he writes, or the material that he writes, it has so much room for good vocals. Like he like sets me up to do the best vocal lines that I can possibly come up with. So when he handed me the Cold Embrace of the Light, the lyrics and the vocals came like that. It was super easy, So he keeps the vocals in mind whenever he writes a song.
Well, I like that, and I like that you actually have like artistic chemistry, that things just flow naturally from
Yeah,
what he does to what you do.
the three of us have that very, very much so. Like co-writing a lot of the stuff at Jack's house was one of the best experiences I've ever had. You know, working with him is truly it's a pleasure.
Okay, so then more about working, I guess. So this album was written, if I'm not mistaken, or at least recorded mostly during quarantine times, like after the pandemic started. So
Oh, the record had gotten finished before the pandemic hit.
oh, okay. So then the only reason why it's been delayed this much is the pandemic, or why?
Yeah. Yeah, right as we were making plans to sort of label shop or whatever, the pandemic hit.
Mm-hmm.
And that pretty, I mean, it slowed everybody down, you know.
Yeah.
It was a very tough time, but now we're finally able to put it out, and I'm grateful.
Well, it's great. It's great. And are you feeling like it still represents you after all this time?
It's hard to say, man. I mean, I'm proud of it, but the next record is gonna be different. It won't have the same tone. And like I said, that's sort of the funny thing about Threads is that we just do what we're feeling. We're not trying to aim for any specific sort of genre or sound or whatever. It's whatever suits the emotion best at that point in time.
Okay.
Like the next record isn't gonna have any doom elements at all whatsoever.
Yeah, and the one before didn't have any doom elements. That actually gets me really curious what's gonna happen next, because it's like just a big question mark for me.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I've already started writing some of it, and it will. I mean, it'll still be Threads. There'll always be those elements that make us what we are, but it'll be different.
Okay, awesome. I'm really looking forward to that. Okay, so let me see what else I have here. Oh yeah, during working on this album, writing, recording, or whatever, do you have any like really fun or maybe really emotional or memorable moments that you would want to share working with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I'm sure Jack had an absolute blast recording my vocals at his house because I have this. I'm a perfectionist when it comes to doing this sort of thing, and I have this unrealistic mindset where I believe I should be nailing everything on the first take, which is completely, it's not realistic at all. And so recording vocals with me can be pretty funny because when I don't nail it on the first try, I will literally curse my very existence repeatedly.
Oh, that's so relatable. My God.
And then poor Jack basically just has to sit there and go, dude, nobody gets it on the first take. You need to relax.
Yeah, I have this feeling that he's probably pretty skilled at this by now, because as far as I know, Adrian, the singer of Seven Spires, also tends to have this syndrome of perfectionism and stuff. And I think a lot of us tend to actually like it was the same for me when I started my reaction channel. It's just reactions, and I was like watching my first ever attempt at a video and it wasn't perfect and I was already hating it. So
yeah, it becomes really easy to be self-critical and be very tough on yourself. It's a lot easier to do that than to be confident or to praise. So I think it's important to try and find a balance. And even to this day, I still struggle with that, but I've gotten a little better.
That's good. Keep at it. I'm actually working on it daily myself.
It's a never-ending struggle. But yeah, aside from that, just writing the record in itself was a really cathartic experience, because it was a reflection of a lot of things that I was experiencing at the time. And, I managed to get that out in a musical form.
Mhm.
So it was very cathartic and very therapeutic.
Yeah, I always feel that about music. Like if you feel either when you're creating it or when you're listening to it that it's actually a healthy outlet for your emotions, like that's probably the best thing it can be.
It can be a double-edged sword because a lot of the times, or at least in my case, I'm reopening a lot of old wounds just
Ouch.
just for this just for the sake of making a song. But I think we all do that. All songwriters do that to an extent.
Yeah. I've heard a number of times the cliche that great art comes from great pain, and I guess it's true to some extent.
Oh, it's very true. Yeah.
Okay, so since you mentioned Jack Costo and I've already mentioned Seven Spires a bit, I also want to ask you about your participation on their latest album. You had a vocal guest performance on The Unforgotten Name and also showed up in the video. So, what was that experience for you being part of that?
It was honestly amazing, man. It is a beautiful song with a beautiful meaning. It's very emotional, straight up my alley, which is why they asked me to do it, because it's a very sad song.
Yeah.
But I was tremendously honored to have been a part of that. It was really special, and I recorded it at Jack's house, with Jack and Adrian being there, of course, and that was a lot of fun. And shooting the video was a blast too. That's definitely one of the most fond memories of my lifetime, is having gone up to New Hampshire with everyone in Spires and just hanging out and shooting the videos. It was truly a wonderful time. It was beautiful.
If I'm not mistaken, it was shot in the same castle where they also shot the Lightbringer video.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Nice. I love that video. I feel it's probably one of the most like cozy and intimate looking music videos I've ever seen. It's very like warm and inviting.
Yes. Well, that was the whole atmosphere of that place we were in. The castle was gorgeous. I loved being there every second of it. It was truly a wonderful experience, and I'm very grateful to all of them for it.
Awesome. Okay, so since I brought up Spires, two members of Seven Spires actually worked on this record because Jack is a member of the band, and as far as I know, Chris recorded the drums.
So yeah, we hired.
So you guys are obviously very close artistically, and I assume also as friends. So I want to ask you, how did you actually get in contact with these guys and ended up being friends and working together?
It's pretty funny how it happened, actually. So in 2016, I had just moved back to Florida from Atlanta. And then right as I moved back, I went back up to Atlanta for the Prague Power Festival, because I had a friend who invited me to go. And so I went, and Adrian and I ended up meeting. And then we added each other on social media and whatnot. And then she introduced me to Jack through Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And then he and I were talking, and we became friends really quickly because we both realized we're sad fucks. And we listened to a lot of the same music and love the same music. And I was attending school at the time, online school for music composition. And that's when I started to get into writing music. And I wrote it for a class project. I wrote what was the beginning of The Reaping, which was the first single we ever put out, which is on the EP.
If I'm not mistaken, also the first song I ever heard from you.
Yeah, it's a popular one. There, everyone loves that song. So I showed him it was a shitty, demo. It was like program drums and then the string parts and then, you know, the chord structure, whatever. And I showed him that. And then he basically said, hey, that's really sad. Let me do guitars for it. And that's how it started. And I kept writing until I had the EP. And then shortly after, Vikram joined, which is funny because Vic and I didn't meet at Prog Prog, but we were both there. And then I added him, or we added each other on Facebook shortly after. And then we started talking. And then I showed him the stuff that Jack and I were working on, and he decided to jump on board.
That's so cool. So you didn't actually plan to start a band as much as just found people that wanted to work with you.
Well, what's even funnier is that I originally did not intend to be the singer.
What did you intend to be?
I was just going to be like the songwriter / keyboardist. I wanted to pull a Nightwish. And I was going to have, basically, I wanted to have like different singers, sort of like an AVANTASIA thing or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But then I quickly realized how much of a pain in the ass that was going to be. And so I said, screw it, I'll do the singing. And then I started taking, you know, voice lessons. My first voice lesson ever was with Adrian, really? Actually. And yeah, so I basically sort of just accidentally became a singer for Threads.
Now
it was intent at all.
That's so cool. Now I actually remember that my first contact with like you and with Threads of Fate was a post from her where I think she was mentioning you as a vocal student, and then I was like, hey, I'm gonna check out what this guy is doing, and I heard the reaping.
Yeah, I was still learning how to sing properly when we recorded that EP.
Okay, so you didn't plan to be a singer. Wow, that's taking me by surprise, because one of my next questions was gonna be, how did you decide to be a singer?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. Yeah, voice lesson with Adrian, she encouraged me to take up singing seriously, and I took her advice. And then Vikram was another person that encouraged me greatly to become a singer.
I mean, having heard both the EP and this album, I can't say I regret that they did. Like, you're really good, both with cleans and with screams.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, what next? Yeah. I wanted to ask you a bit about yourself as a human, as a musician. First off, you actually mentioned you don't like that much listening to doom metal other than Swallow the Sun. And I've actually seen this happen with a lot of musicians, that the music they create is very different from what they regularly listen to. So I wanted to ask you, what kind of music do you actually listen to in your spare time?
So it varies a lot, because it's purely dependent on my mood or what I'm mainly feeling like at the time, like what my main emotion is. So for a good while, I was obsessed with AOR. So a lot of like 80s sounding bands, like Find Me, you know, Wet, or
I'm not sure I've heard of any of this. I'm not sure I'm even certain what AOR is.
Arena rock, basically. That's kind of what it stands for. Basically, any band that is on Frontiers Records.
Oh, now I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, all the 80s guys, and then of course all the 80s classics, like, you know, like Cinderella, Whitesnake, Motley Crue, that kind of thing. So for a while, that's all I ever listened to. And then recently, I've just been listening to a lot of Evergrey. I've been a huge Evergrey fan for well over 16 years now. I would safely say that Tom Englund is probably my top influence as a singer, next to Jeff Scott Sotto. Those two are like my biggest influences as a singer.
Wow.
So a lot of Evergrey recently, and then a band called Evil Invaders.
I've heard
They
of
are
it.
on they're on Napalm Records. They're basically like an 80s thrash band, like an old school 80s sounding thrash band. They're amazing, super talented guys. And King Diamond, a lot of King Diamond.
Okay, that's already quite the cocktail. I'm trying to piece all those together.
No, it's literally all over the place musically, man. I go back and forth between everything I just mentioned, and then I love listening to music scores a lot as well, like film scores or video game scores.
I love those. Especially since we started the reaction channel, we've unplanned just ended up reacting to a lot of video game soundtracks from Doom, from Killer Instinct, from stuff like that. And
Oh, it is. Killer Instinct is a classic.
yeah, and I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, Killer Instinct is definitely a classic. And then some of my favorite video game scores are Threads of Fate, which there is a video game called Threads of Fate. That's kind of where the name sort of came from. It was a game that I was obsessed with when I was a kid. It was it was an RPG on Squaresoft back when it was Squaresoft and not Square Enix. And the score for a game called Vagrant Story, which was another RPG on Squaresoft.
I've never heard of these. I have new games to play.
They're old. They're very old.
I mean, I'm stuck playing the same games I was playing between the ages of 6 and 12, so I don't think old games should be that much of a problem. How old?
Let's see. I was probably 9. So like well over 20 years old. Like probably 23, 24 years old.
Wow, so before the year 2000. I think.
Yeah. We're talking like late 90s, early 2000, yeah.
I think probably the oldest game I've ever played came out in 2000.
Oh man. Have you ever heard of a Chrono Trigger or Chrono Cross?
I've heard of it, I think.
Yeah, those are other games in that same category, like fantasy RPG, that also had amazing scores. So I've obsessed often over those as well. But yeah, a lot of like RPG scores are my favorites. So clearly, obviously a lot of the Final Fantasy scores as well.
That's another one I started getting into only recently.
Absolute classics.
Okay. So yeah, I was also gonna ask you who do you look up to as a vocalist, but you just mentioned Tom Englund. Evergrey is a weird band for me. I know a lot of my favorite musicians love Evergrey. When I was getting into my fan phase with Nightwish, actually, I found out that Flora Jansen's one of her favorite bands is Evergrey.
Mm-hmm.
I still struggle to get into them. Every time I listen to them, I hear them, I can tell they're really good. They don't really click with me for some reason. I've even seen them live. Live, they were great.
Yeah, they are amazing live. For probably obvious reasons, they're a band that I heavily connect with because it's a sad band, like
Yeah.
sad. And Threads of Fate ends up being sort of a tribute to that sort of music where it focuses on the darker aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, ever since I heard them when I was 16, I've been obsessed.
Yeah, I have this feeling that for a lot of us, like metalheads, it's the sadness that binds us.
That's a pretty fair statement to say. ever since I began my career, a few years ago with Threads of Fate and everything that's ensued since, and I've gotten to meet a lot of these people. We're all really sad.
Yeah. I mean, I also
Yeah,
tend to be quite sad, and I think that's why I relate to a lot of
yeah,
everyone. Um,
yeah. A lot of us are pretty messed up. That's where it all comes.
yeah, and it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Devin Townsend that says, "Unfuck yourself."
I love that. That's another musician that I look up to tremendously.
Definitely one of my favorites for sure. Especially
Yeah.
the Empath album, I thought was like a beginner's book to mental health.
No, he's a wonderful human being, and the world is lucky to have someone like that around.
Definitely, I relate to that feeling so much. Okay, so the last thing I want to ask you, and also to contrast a bit with all the sad, um, hopefully this is gonna be a hilarious question. How do you feel about the fact that on the Metal Archives your name is misspelled John?
I don't really care. I mean, John is my legal name anyway.
It is your legal name?
Yeah, I just choose to spell Jon sometimes, like online or whatever. It's not a big deal to me.
I didn't know. I thought that was funny because everywhere else I saw you Jon, and then on the Metal Archives the H was there.
Yeah, the John is my actual real name.
Okay, well, that's all I had to ask you. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much, Andre.
And to everyone watching, thank you very much for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed your stay, and we'd love to see you back at the Windmill very soon. Corpse is out.